Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode of Living a Life in Full is brought to you by ATI Physical Therapy. If you need physical therapy, choose ATI. ATI offers exceptional care, trusted expertise, and remarkable outcomes, customized to your needs. ATI has over 800 clinics coast to coast in 25 states. Want to start feeling better fast? ATI can help address chronic pain or recovery from an injury or surgery expertly, quickly, and conveniently. ATI's FIRST program uses a performance-based methodology to safely return injured workers to their workplace. FIRST is designed to increase strength, endurance, and cardiovascular functioning. ATI's sports medicine provides athletic training services to help athletes get back in the game. ATI has hundreds of professional, collegiate, high school, middle school, and club relationships nationwide. ATI also offers a variety of specialty services, including home health, hand therapy, and women's health. To learn more about ATI's advances in evidence-based practice, clinical outcomes, and their innovative new smartphone app, please visit atipt.com. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout. I'm very excited to have our guest, Matt Bailey, on the show today. You may have heard of Matt before. He's a world-traveling writer, photographer, travel consultant, and marketer. He's founded and hosts Canada's Road to 150, a 150-day Canada-wide multimedia road trip celebrating Canada's 150th birthday. He's also started Canadian Free Flyers, a membership site that teaches Canadians how to travel the world cost-effectively, and he also runs Live Limitless. Matt studied management and international marketing at the University of Lethbridge, where he met his wife. His studies took him to Southeast Asia and Denmark, but really, Matt has been all over the world, which we are going to discuss in detail. Matt, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So, you have lived and done a lot in a short time, my friend. Can you kind of discuss your origin story that for folks that aren't familiar with you or Live Limitless?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it all started, I grew up in a pretty small mining community in northern Alberta. So it's funny because my wife's from Mexico and she says I kind of have that stereotypical Canadian kind of background where I grew up in a mining town. I had the northern lights. I had the really, really cold winters in those times. And then, I liked it, but once I hit kind of between 18 and 20, I kind of felt that yearning to see more and see what was out there. And I actually started off by just enrolling in university. It just gave me an excuse to leave, I guess. So I moved to a city called Calgary. It's only about 800 kilometers south of where I was. Uh-huh. But it was a much bigger city, and it just kind of allowed me. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have any friends yet. So I felt like I had this opportunity to reinvent myself, I guess. And so I started trying all these new things. Once I got to the new city, anytime I saw something that sparked my interest, I got into it. So I saw a poster one day advertising for trying out for the Olympic speed skating team. And I thought, that sounds fun. I mean, I've never speed skated before, but
why not?
I played hockey,
uh-huh.
So I know how to skate. And it was a cool experience anyway. And I kind of knew I probably wouldn't make it, but I just wanted to have the experience of trying out.
Good for you. Was it intimidating? Was it scary? Or did you just say, hey, this is a lark and I've got nothing to lose? Or
it was intense, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. At that time, I was going to university and I had a roommate and he chose to have a party that night.
Oh.
so I couldn't even sleep. So I went to the
Great.
tryouts with very little sleep, and it was like 4 hours off ice and 4 hours on ice.
Oh man, man.
Um,
Well, imagine,
but it
Matt. I
was cool.
mean, if you hadn't had that party, who knows, man? It could have been Olympic gold.
Yeah,
So
no, right? I should blame the roommate. No.
that's right. Well, it's funny you should say that because I just did an interview with a fellow, John Coyle, who is a U.S. Olympic speed skater, and just to kind of hear about the what his training was like and his competition was like. It's just the training was grueling and the competition just sounded terrifying. The speeds you guys get up to and stuff, and just on these, like killer blade, like literally killer blades, and it was just like, that's that. I tip my hat to you, man. That just seems very, very scary and intimidating. So
Yeah, and it was one of those things. Sorry. Go ahead.
so I was just going to say, so you also, I've in doing some background on you, I've also seen that you've talked about the desire to kind of go from ordinary to extraordinary and to try and develop a limitless mindset. Can you tell us about that desire and how it's fueled you?
Yeah, it was kind of. I think it all stemmed from like it's similar to that experience with the bobsleigh. Um, I just wanted to start trying to do as many cool things as I could, anything that sparked my interest. And uh, one thing led to another. I started off, like with the Olympic uh, bobsleigh tryouts, but then I had always thought like I wondered what acting would be like. So I found an acting agent at that same time, and
Wow.
started getting small roles like background
Really?
continuity extras. And then I went and
Wow.
tried I got a lead role in a comedy movie that it was just a student flick, but it was an awesome experience for a
Wow.
month. And then and then it's funny though, throughout university, I guess there was two things I must have kept saying to friends, because I remember in the end they said, well, why don't you just go do it? You keep talking about it so much. So one of them was a 12-week fitness challenge
Uh-huh.
that I had always wanted to do. It was called the Body for Life.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of it's still active now, but it was more popular back then.
Hmm.
And then I had always wanted to go to Australia for some reason. I don't know if it's just because it was the opposite side of the world. It just always
Right.
attracted me in some way.
Wow.
Um, so I started off with that 12-week fitness program, and I completed it, and I did really good. After college, I was in about like 20, I don't think 24% body fat, something like
Wow.
that. So I was starting to get a bit overweight, and I dropped myself down to about 10
Wow.
in 12 weeks. And I think just by completing that, it gave me such confidence to start doing more things. And then eventually I booked that trip to Australia, and it was kind of there actually. I started off in New Zealand, and I think the first day we arrived, my cousin joined me for the first 3 weeks, and then I went solo for about 4 or 5 months.
Uh-huh.
And I signed us up for skydiving that same day we arrived, and we signed up for the next morning, so there was no way to cancel without losing money. And I mean, it was like terrifying, but having that, not being able to get out of it in a way,
Yeah.
really helped. And after doing that, it was kind of one of those things where, wow, I just survived skydiving. I never ever imagined myself as a skydiver
Uh-huh.
uh, ever before. But then throughout that trip, I ended up going bungee jumping, hang gliding. I learned how to scuba dive actually even went scuba diving with sharks at night
Wow.
in Australia. And I think every time I did one of those things that really brought me out of my comfort zone, it just gave me more and more confidence to try new things. And that's what kind of led to starting the blog Live Limitless, as I just thought it really. I don't think it matters if you wanted to be an entrepreneur or if you want a normal career. I don't think it matters, but just like being able to get out of your comfort zone
Hmm.
and try new things, I think is a really good way to experience life.
That's great. How did you, were you still in university when you went to Australia, or were you graduated out by then?
I was, I believe when I went to Australia, I still had 2 semesters left.
Okay. Did
So
you travel hack Australia? Because I can't imagine that would be an inexpensive flight or trip or spending that much
at
time
that
there.
time, no, I didn't actually know what travel hacking was yet.
Mm.
But I had saved up enough for the flight, and then um, actually got a work visa
Mm-hmm.
as well. Although I didn't use it as much as I should have, but I did everything kind of on the cheap for the most part.
Good for you.
Sometimes I stayed in a town for a month, and I'd work at the hostel, like volunteering,
Uh-huh.
uh, small hours just for rent, basically.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I traveled around like that. I found Australia is one of those places a lot of people go, and it's really popular for road trips. So you can often find people that are looking for someone to hop in their car with them,
Mm-hmm.
and you just share the expenses of gas and stuff like that.
That's great.
So it can be cheap, yeah.
So did you kind of like go coast to coast, or where all did you visit while you were there?
Pretty much, almost did the full circle. I
Gosh.
regret not doing I
Wow.
regret not doing the whole West Coast because I tried. I
Mm-hmm.
flew over to Perth, and that's the West Coast is the more isolated region.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I found someone there, some people from England that were making the road trip, and they had bought this beater car,
Uh-huh.
and I jumped in with them, and I think we only made it one night, and it broke down.
Oh gosh.
And then I was just I don't know I was so it was a slow season at that time of year, and it was hard to find people, so I ended up. It's funny now to think of it this way, but they told me about a place called Bali, which at that time I had never heard of. I didn't know
Uh-huh.
much about Indonesia, but it was only about a 2 hour flight from Perth.
Uh-huh.
So I booked that and ended up going there
Nice.
instead. But it's that trip that kind of sparked me to keep traveling.
I can imagine. So, is this what years was this? I kind of want
This was
to.
in 2009.
Okay, so there was some tech, but it's not as ubiquitous as it is today and whatnot. Where you're.
No, and there was no. It's funny. I remember starting a WordPress blog at that time,
Uh-huh.
and I don't think there was Facebook yet. I think Facebook was around, but it was kind of I think it was in those stages where it was just open to colleges,
Right, right.
universities. So yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
kind of interesting.
So were your folks worried about you, or what was it like for them? Did they say, or they support your wanderlust, or what was that like?
Yeah, I think so. I don't. I mean, I think they have a little bit of worry, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
I tried to keep in touch at least once a week,
Mm-hmm.
um,
And
just
we
to let them know. And I don't think I told them if I was skydiving in advance. Just
yeah.
tell them later. I already
Wise
did.
wise decision. Oh, and by the way. Oh gosh. So were you blogging on the road then, or did you start the WordPress blog after you gotten back? Set us a frame for that.
I was blogging on the road, but I don't think anyone was reading it at that time.
Mm. Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
it's kind of like actually I'm not sure if it's still active. I should try to
That'd be
see what those
interesting.
stories were like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't taking it super seriously.
Gotcha.
But I definitely kept kind of a journal.
We'll do a little
Uh,
recon on it and see if we can find it. We'll put it in the show notes
yeah, for sure.
unless it's too embarrassing or something. I think it's interesting to kind of think about the longevity of an archive of a semi-public or very public kind of diary. Kind of from whence you came on that initial voyage that really sounds sort of a springboard for this lifestyle of travel that you've had. So
Yeah, and
so
it's interesting to now that I compare
uh-huh.
travel then compared to how I travel now, because at that time I wasn't really into photos. I had a small one of the cameras that can fit in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there was no iPhone yet at that time, or I think the first one had just arrived. But I just remember I think I took about 80 photos in that whole 6 months, and now I probably take 80 photos a day when I go, and I
Sure.
have like a mirrorless camera, and I have all this tech. And at that time, I was not planned at all. I just showed up and kind of worked it out
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis.
Uh-huh.
Whereas now a little more uh, in the planning stages before I go. But
Yeah.
yeah,
That's great. So, did you also was there travel related to your time at university?
yeah. Well, just um, I don't know which year it was. Probably 2005 or six. I got a scholarship to study in Denmark for 2 weeks. So that was
Wow.
actually my first trip out of Canada. I hadn't even been to the US
Uh-huh.
at that point. And then in 2012, I actually went. I went and completed my last semester of university in Malaysia.
Oh, wow. And so, did you get to travel while you were there too, I suppose, or not?
Yeah, so we ended up. So by 2012, my um, well, my wife now, but I had met her in 2009 in university.
Uh-huh.
She had moved here from Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
and she wasn't allowed to work for a year.
Mm.
Like she had to wait for her work permits
Uh-huh.
here. So I was like, well, she's bored, obviously, and I still had university, and they had some partnerships with universities around the world. But because of the classes I had left, it was Malaysia or Poland, and it was in the winter. And
Uh-huh.
for me, it was actually a hard decision in the sense that Poland's got a lot of interesting
Sure.
history as well.
Right.
But everyone was like, no, you should totally hit
Yeah.
Malaysia up in the
Yeah.
winter. So, yeah, the it was only 4 months, and we ended up staying a year and
Wow.
backpacking around all of Southeast Asia and China.
Wow. Again, on a similar kind of work a little bit and live a little bit, or how'd you
No,
swing
at that
that?
time it was just ourselves. We saved up before going,
Wow.
and of course, like Southeast Asia is quite cheap
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a way, anyways. But we definitely at that point we racked up a little bit of debt
Uh,
and came back and got to work to pay it off. But yeah, even at that point, I actually had no had not heard of travel hacking yet.
yeah. Wow. You
So
were doing it. You just didn't know what it was called. So
yeah, exactly.
that's great. It's sort of like the proverbial, like I did the between junior and senior year of backpacking through Europe with a couple of friends of mine. It's like living on just very dinky dollars a day kind of a thing and losing a lot of
Yeah,
weight. But it's a great you feel very independent and you feel that. It's not that you're needing to stay in a Shangri-La, a pension or a hostel or a tent, which we, camped out or we tried to sleep on trains, going from one place to another. And again, that was very much pre, travel hacking kinds of things. And, it worked out and, people have been doing it for decades. So I tip my hat. I think it's kind of that fun chance and opportunity to be able to do those kinds of things early on. And if you get the bug, then to be able to develop it into a variety of other kinds of aspects of your life. So, did you ever have any, dicey situations or anything that you had to troubleshoot, or was everything pretty
uh,
much unicorns and butterflies?
yeah, pretty much. Like surprisingly, in all the places we've been, and we've never had any issues where we've been nervous or something like that.
That's great.
Um, there's always like smaller issues that come up, but
Hmm. I've had
nothing that would make a great story.
I've had some guests that have done traveling worldwide on motorcycles, and one fellow had done it, solo, and another had done it solo, but then met who had become his future wife, and then they did it together, and just wonderful stories, and almost kind of the opposite of dicey situations. I mean, the problems would be things like mechanical breakdowns or bad roads or something, but anytime they did have a mechanical breakdown, it'd be like strangers would come up and offer to help and give them a ride, and just really a lot of kind-hearted people, just other travelers on the road, and you sort of share, even though you may be from different places or different walks of life or different ages or whatever, you have the common thread of being travelers in a a welcoming but different land. And they, just it really kind of reinstates my faith in human nature and people being good to to help people and do things that while they're on the road or what have you.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things where if you talk to people who've never traveled, they they'd probably they'd probably be a bit scared of it, right? Just
Hmm.
because of everything you might hear.
Right.
And then if you talk to people who have traveled, almost no one has ever had a
Yeah.
bad situation. And
Yeah.
I remember even listening to a podcast with one of the cameramen from the Anthony Bourdain
Uh-huh.
show, and I mean they visited a lot of countries over their time,
Hmm.
over like a decade, and he said the only time they ever had any kind of issue was actually in a really like remote village in Africa, where they they're coming in there with cameras
Mm-hmm.
as if they have a lot of money. And I think
Oh,
when they left and they didn't give any money to anyone, people started to like throw rocks at the vehicle.
wow. Oh,
But
gosh.
that was it.
Huh.
That was it.
Huh.
Out of a whole 10 years of visiting all the continents. And
That's pretty amazing. So speaking of 10 years, I mean, if Australia was sort of your maiden voyage, so to speak, and really kind of got you into the travel aspects of life, it's not, soon be 2019, so almost 10 years of travel, and by my count, you've been to like at least 35 countries. I know you've been all over the United States. You've been to every province in Canada. So tell us about that. How do you pick where to go, and what's travel like for you today in 2018, 2019 versus what it was like in 2009?
yeah, it's kind of it's always been hard to pick where to go because there's so many countries we still like to visit.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it revolved around maybe one destination. Like when we chose going to Tanzania,
Mm-hmm.
we had always wanted to go on a safari. So we ended up going to Tanzania, and then I'd look at the map and see what was around. So we ended up adding Uganda into the mix so we could go see the gorillas, and Ethiopia sounded like a really interesting country. So we added that in.
Nice.
And then so there's no real roadmap for planning where to go. Over the last year or two, we've been a little more focused with trying to grow the website
Mm-hmm.
and the online business. So that's why we kind of focused on Canada as our niche for
Uh-huh.
mustdocanada.com.
Gotcha.
And but yeah, it's kind of it's hard. It usually comes from choosing one country,
Yeah.
and then because of travel hacking,
Mm-hmm.
now that we use a lot of points for flights,
Mm-hmm.
we usually try to work in stopovers and layovers
Mm-hmm.
along the way.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense because usually for people in North America, the biggest expense is getting to whatever other continent it is that you want to go visit. And then once you're there, like for Europe, for example, there's a lot of, just like short haul flights or whatever that are very inexpensive. And certainly Eurail and Eurail passes and things, if people are a certain age or if they're students or whatever, can take advantage of that. And then like you said, in Asia, oftentimes, food and living expense and staying in a hostel or even staying in a very nice hotel can be relatively inexpensive. And so once you've made it over, then it makes a whole lot of sense to see as many countries or see as many whatever it is that you want to see or do while you're there. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you focus on a place like for Canada, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Even last year when we did our 150-day road trip, even that was only kind of like the highlights of each place. And as you meet people, it doesn't matter whether it's here or in the US or overseas, they start to tell you about other places. And I mean, you could probably focus a year on one country and not see it all.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. I think a lot of times, well, like again, some past guests that I've had will spend time, in a community because maybe they're working or, they need to, squirrel away some dollars to be able to, make the next leg of the journey. And it really gives them a very fine grain, warm personal experience that you really do know the place that you're in, that you stop being a tourist, and it's almost like you stop being even a traveler. You sort of become a part of the fabric of that community for a few weeks time or a month, and people establish friendships and relationships that they maintain to this day. I think that's just so, again, back to the it makes me feel good about human nature and people connecting that way. So the where you're at today now, is this where like Canadian Free Flyers comes in? Tell us about your knack for that and to create something specifically for Canadians.
Yeah, well, at the time, so I actually launched Canadian Free Flyers from Asia, from Southeast Asia,
Of course.
that year. Yeah, and it was
That's
kind of
cool.
it's funny. It's funny too because I ran into so many problems because the reason why I was working on it on the road a little bit, but I wasn't putting in like a lot of effort because I was more focused on the travel.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I had an email from one of the biggest newspapers in Canada that wanted to do a story, like a feature story
Wow.
on the website. So I was like, well, I better get it
Better get
launched
it
and ready.
together.
Get it ready. So
That's good.
um, I started working on it, and then we were in Myanmar, um, and I opened up my PayPal, and all of a sudden my whole account was closed
Oh,
instantly. I don't know if it's still the case now, but at that time, the U.S. had really tight sanctions with Myanmar, and I
uh-huh.
guess just the fact of me opening up my PayPal there,
Oh,
it was shut down, and it took me like 3 weeks to get it back up and running.
wow. Huh.
I had to like phone into PayPal and tell them I wasn't like
I'll
money
be,
laundering.
yeah, I'll be darned. Well, there's an interesting, who would have thought? That's
Yeah,
wild. Wow.
and then after Myanmar, we went to uh, up to China, and
Uh-huh.
that's when it was launching, and all of a sudden I couldn't access WordPress because they have the firewall against all that kind of stuff. So,
Golly.
so I didn't know what was happening
Wow.
until I got,
Oh,
but it worked out,
well, that's good.
and
Happy
and
ending.
but it's kind of so fitting
Mm-hmm.
for what it's about. But no, I started Canadian Free Flyers because at that time I there was there was already lots of websites that were catering
Mm-hmm.
to American travel hacking, and um, for some reason the kind of the credit card industry does seem to be much more popular in Canada and the US
Mm-hmm.
than other places. So
Uh-huh.
in terms of earning points, it's definitely the two best countries. Um, and just due to the population, the US has a lot more opportunity. So most people usually focus on the US. And I thought there wasn't anyone doing it for Canada. So maybe if I niche down, it would allow me to have a different market
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And it was also what I knew best. Like I knew what the best credit cards were here,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in the US I didn't unless I followed someone else's website.
Right.
So that's why I focused down, and it's a much smaller market, but it did allow me to kind of stand out as the expert, I guess.
Well, I think that's really important. I think everybody, some people try to unsuccessfully try to be all things to all people, and I very much encourage when I'm doing consultations with startups or whatever to really get kind of niched down to become the go-to trusted authority, expert, spokesperson, for whatever it is that entity, be it a startup or be it an individual, to focus on, because my way back when as a psychologist I did a lot of consulting for people getting their practices started, private practice, and people said, well, I treat everything, I treat all ages, I do this, I do that, and it was sort of like you just get lost in the noise of all other therapists, as opposed to when someone says, I have this kind of problem, who's the expert? Well, then that I think is much more successful for people with as entrepreneurs like you, be it travel industry or people with a clinical practice. So I think that's very, very smart. So the kind of deconstruct for us what like, how does Canadian Free Flyers work? Like, do people like follow it as a blog? Do people sign up? Is it a subscription service? Or if someone wanted to take advantage of it, what would they do, and how would they be able to use it?
Yeah, so it's kind of changed over the. Originally, it was kind of an online ebook that people paid for. Then it became a membership site
Uh-huh.
where I was sending out deals
Uh-huh.
every month. But I kind of started to realize like there's not a lot of deals every month. So
Mm-hmm.
I've since changed it back to a one-time fee,
Uh-huh.
and it's basically once they pay the fee, there's like an online course, basically all different kinds of um, some video tutorials and that kind of stuff where I
Uh-huh.
just teach them what travel hacking is, how to utilize it, what the best credit cards are, um, depending where they want to go, what points to focus on. And then I think one of the most important aspects is learning how to redeem the points.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize, for example, that when you book a flight with points, you can often add stopovers and layovers in for free.
Uh-huh.
So like when we were flying to Costa Rica, it would be 40,000 points
Mm-hmm.
from Canada, but you can actually add in Mexico. So we ended up uh, going to Mexico for a month as a stopover, and then to Costa Rica, and then home for the same amount of points. So you're basically
Wow.
getting a free destination. So,
That's great. So there's not, I mean, for a month, that sounds really significant. That's great. That's,
yeah, it's fun. And I think that's the thing too. A lot of people think stopovers are a day or
yeah,
something like that, but they can
yeah,
actually be. I mean, it depends on where you're flying to, but they can
sure.
almost be as long as you can, as long as it's under a year.
That's,
Usually. So
that's
you
fantastic.
can do quite a
Wow.
bit.
So when you like go on a, and maybe I don't know if you do this anymore, but like, do you still do like long, like, well, obviously if you did this, like you were a month in Mexico, how do you manage bills and, the day in, day out kinds of stuff that, that drive all of us crazy? How do you do that remotely?
Um, Mostly, I switched most of any bills I can to being online,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them are automatic. So with our apartment, for example, in Calgary, we have it set so that for taxes, as one example, you can pay each year, or you can just pay by the month, and they'll automatically like take it out of your account.
Oh,
So
okay.
I try to set as many things up like that as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So
Just autopilot, kind of set it and forget it kind of a thing. So,
yeah, pretty much. And if
gotcha.
if we went on longer trips, we actually like rented. At one point, we actually rented out our apartment for a good 4 to 5 years because we knew we'd be only coming back for a few months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So we just end up staying with family.
That's great. That's a great,
It just made it easier.
I would imagine, yeah. I think that those kinds of things. If people aren't creative or don't hear people, like your story, that it feels like one of those burdens where just yet another reason of why I can't go do that. Well, what am I going to do with my apartment, or what am I going to do with my cable bill, or what am I going to, and then when you find out that people like you and Amy Scott, who's been on the show, there's a variety of different kinds of just very straightforward, easy to use kinds of tools to be able to do that. So that's fantastic. Do you ever have problems like getting funds when you're in another country? Do you just use like a debit card and go to an ATM, or any issues with getting cash, so to speak, wherever you're at?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually always been more or less easy. The only place I ever remember being difficult was Myanmar,
Uh huh.
but that was at that time. I think it's actually since opened up and it's probably changed a lot. But that was actually one of the things I liked about it at that time. It was the one country I've been to that had no ATMs and and no banks for foreigners. So you actually had to bring in mint condition U.S. currency
I'll be
uh,
darned.
that
Oh,
was no older than 2006.
oh gosh.
So it's just fun. I remember going to a money exchange in Thailand, and I said I needed I think 1,500 in US because you had to kind of like try to math it out what you would need.
Uh huh.
Um, and he started to pull out some US money, and then I mentioned is Myanmar, and he put it all away and he went into a different box, which had all the mint condition
I'll
stuff.
be darned. That was very helpful. That's there. That would have been terrifying to get there and go, "Your money's no good here, sir." So,
Oh yeah, because
wow.
there's nowhere to get. But I think now they have ATMs. But other than
Uh,
that one problem, yeah,
would they
it's never
take
really been an
would they
issue.
take credit cards or not back then?
No, there was nothing at that time.
Gosh, wow. You feel like you have to kind of like have one of those like silver briefcases handcuffed to your wrist, as you're
Yeah, no.
entering the country with your briefcase full of cash. Wow, that's
And we do rely on credit cards quite a bit, but they're actually not they're not as widely accepted outside of Canada and the U.S.
uh-huh.
Um, Even in a place like in Japan, which is one of our favorite countries, it's a very modern country,
Mm-hmm.
but almost no one uses credit cards. It's a very like cash-based society.
I'll be darned. Wow. Well, and those are
And
probably.
and actually,
Go
and
ahead.
Japan can actually be a bit tricky. I don't know if it's changed, but when we were there, the only ATMs that would accept American or I guess any foreign debit cards was 7-Eleven.
That's wild. Wow. Well, and I suppose then it's these kinds of experiences, and these are some of the benefits of, taking your course and being able to learn these kinds of things. I mean, those are the spooky kinds of things that you really don't want to learn that the hard way. Once you're in country or something, go, uh-oh, if I would have done this, if I would have known this, I would have done something a little bit differently. So, I think those are not. It's not just the issues of, what are good ways to use points and things like that, which are huge, but then also just these sort of interstitial little kinds of quirky things about this country or that country, like the cash exchange guy in Thailand knowing to give you more fresh recent currency, U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
So that's great. Wow. So in these 35 some odd countries, do you have I hate to say it's like you're saying a favorite child or something, but
Yeah, no.
does an experience stand out, or was there some, was it is there any country that just really stood out to you? Like, I'd love to go back there all the time, or I'd love to live there, or this was this is a highlight on my highlight reel of travel. This would be the first place I would think of.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's very hard for sure.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I know we've kind of summed it up as we really love both like North America and Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Asia was, I don't know if it's because it was our first trip together or not, but it's like it still stands out as the most iconic
Uh-huh.
of any of the places we visited. And
Nice.
um, it would be hard to pick one country. I know we
Yeah.
both really love Japan.
Uh-huh.
I find it's one of those countries that's it's so modern, but yet I don't know, they still remain so iconic.
Right.
Like you can arrive there and you really feel like you're in a different country.
Yeah.
Everyone's really friendly, the food's great, and
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard. Yeah, there hasn't been a place I haven't liked for sure.
Yeah. That's good.
Um,
So, do you, like, where's next? Do you have plans of where you might venture forth to next?
Not yet, no,
Yeah.
no, we actually haven't. So after last year, after the big road trip, we've kind of this is the one time we've said that we want to focus on some of the projects
Sure.
we're trying to complete
Yeah.
before um, traveling again. We're now kind of in that stage too of trying to start a family,
Oh,
stuff like that. So
wonderful.
I find myself looking at some of the family blogs to
Uh-huh.
to keep reminding myself that I can continue traveling with kids.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Uh,
a well, that might be maybe your next niche, so
True.
that learning how to go about doing that. I've read some, and there's actually some great YouTube videos and stuff of families managing that, and it's just like, wow, I remember when our kids were little, it was just like, a big adventure to go, see grandparents like across the state line kind of a thing. So I just know that but people do it all the time. It's, I tip my hat. I know it's not easy, but it's also not impossible. So that's
Yeah,
very
I can't
cool.
imagine the logistics
Yeah,
for,
yeah,
especially for some of the larger families with 5 or 6 kids, but
yeah. Oh gosh,
they make it
yeah.
work.
Yeah, they do. It's amazing.
I
I,
would really like to get to Antarctica soon, just because that's the one continent that
mm-hmm.
I haven't made it to yet. And
I had a friend who just went there, and just she was quite the photographer, and just it was just amazing, the kinds of things that she saw. But it's one of the last things on most people's travel list, because it is certainly not easy to get to, and can be quite the adventure. I remember I had a friend who was quite the runner, and they were going to do a marathon on Antarctica, in Antarctica, on Antarctica, and the passage they were going over via boat, and the passage was so bad that they couldn't make it. So they decided they would run their marathon distance on the deck of the boat, which I just thought, oh my gosh. so so it's still kind of the untamed territory kind of thing. I mean, just the kind of no matter what, with jets and great boats and icebreakers and whatever's, that there's a lot of adventure in the aspect of getting there as well as being there. So I have not been myself, but it is certainly on my travel bucket list. So
yeah, and even well, one of my goals was to try and scuba dive there as well,
oh gosh.
which
Oh man. Oh,
which
there's
requires much more training.
gosh, yeah.
Uh,
So you've done sharks, and did you do, I presume, like did you do the Great Barrier Reef and stuff when you were in Australia,
yeah,
or
so
was it?
yeah, that's where I learned
Oh,
how to scuba dive,
okay,
and
got yeah. So,
even that just kind of it came out of nowhere. One of the guys staying at my hostel,
uh-huh,
or at the hostel I was staying at, he had went and done it the week before,
uh-huh.
and was telling me about it, and I had never envisioned myself scuba diving. It wasn't even a goal I had at any point in time, because I never, I don't know, it just wasn't those things that stood out.
Right, right,
And
yeah.
then he mentioned it, and it sounded like something cool to do, so I signed up for the course and went out,
Wow.
and it ended up becoming like probably one of my all all-time favorite hobbies.
I bet. Wow. And it's one of those things where I think you can kind of do it, kind of over your lifetime too. I mean, there's always going to be
Yeah.
some place to see, or some, new exotic locale, or what have you. That's fantastic. So, I with Live Limitless, I think that was one of the first things that really kind of caught my eye about your work and your activities. And if people that know me, I am very much into lists. I'm very much into life lists and bucket lists and doing those kinds of things. And if it help me get my facts straight if I misspeak this, but I believe you had a 100 item bucket list or life list or life resume to-do list that you wanted to do, and I believe you accomplished all 100 of those. Is that correct?
Yeah,
So
yeah, my first.
give us a sample. I know you've jumped out of an airplane. I know you've scuba dived in the Great Barrier Reef and with sharks, but can you think of a few others? Kind of, and you've been an actor, and I mean, it's just really it sounds like just a great rich experience of life in the few years that you've been living. So what else was on that list, Matt?
I know one of my last ones was actually speaking in front of a large group.
Uh huh.
That was also something like I grew up with. I've always had uh, kind of a stutter
Uh huh.
a little bit. Like it's not as bad now, but I grew up with one. So, and I always admired when I saw people speak on stage, and especially if they're really good at it. I
Right.
thought I don't know, for some reason it just stood out as something I'd love to do one day. And one of my challenges that I did when I moved to that new city was I took a kind of a public speaking course with Dale Carnegie
Uh huh.
class
Uh huh.
kind of thing. And so it made me a little more comfortable, but still I had only spoken in front of those smaller groups. And then a friend had asked me, "Hey, do you want to speak about your story in front of?" We do these monthly events, and I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." And I thought it was going to be maybe like 30 or 40 people,
Mm-hmm.
and I had already told him yes. And then after I was like, I should probably ask him how many people this is, and then he said it was like 400,
Oh gosh.
and I was like, wow.
Uh-oh.
But like it's a good thing I think I had already tried out everything else, because there might have been a time where I was too nervous and said no, try to make up an excuse. But I always
Wow.
thought, well, I'll commit to it and try it out and
Good for
not
you.
back away. And it worked out, and it was something. It was a big thing for me to be able to speak in front of that many people.
Yeah, that is very scary and intimidating, but especially with that. And I would think, maybe you've also now acted and, that sort of a thing too. I mean, those must have been very high anxiety things at the time. So bravo. I really applaud you for, it's definitely getting outside of your comfort zone in most all these kinds of things.
And even another one, it's not. It doesn't seem as big as like visiting the Amazon or hang gliding and that kind of stuff, which were all awesome goals. But one of them was just like selling something door to door,
Oh,
because it was that's for me that it's terrifying. And
yeah. Oh, I would hate to do that. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not a fan of rejection, so that's just
and that was one of
asking
those
for
things.
it.
I
Wow.
I took a job one summer, and I ended up doing very well at it, and they brought me back as a manager for the next season. But even still, even after doing it for 2 years, it was never like in my comfort zone.
Yeah, not a
Every time I
natural.
went up to a door, it was just like
Yeah,
a challenge. But I'm glad
yeah.
I did it, because it's just one of those. I find anytime you overcome something like that, like a big fear,
Hmm.
it just helps build the confidence for the next one.
Yeah, that's good. It's good that you can be able, to kind of scale those kinds of things. It's sort of the psychological or emotional version of how you travel. It's sort of like then you travel to one country, but then you get to do a variety of other things in other, neighboring countries or whatever. And it's the same thing. You take this one skill set, and then gain strength and resiliency from it to be able to apply it and reapply it or use it in other kinds of areas. That's a good life skill to be able to have. So. I guess most recently, then you did the Canada's Road to 150, and so you traveled across the span. Was it like in 150 days as well too, as a homage to the 150th
Yeah, yeah.
birthday? So, what spurred that idea? I think that's so clever and creative. But how'd you come up with that?
Was yeah, we were actually, I think it was, we had just came back from traveling in 2016, and we were trying to think of like what to do next. And
Mm-hmm.
um I just I wish I had thought of it a bit earlier because there was a lot of like funding available for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I
darn
just,
it.
yeah, I thought everyone's like, there was so much marketing being done for Canada's 150, and I had already had a website called Must Do Canada at
Uh-huh.
that time, and at that time it was kind of it was just like a hobby blog
Mm-hmm.
because we had done a previous road trip across Canada that was only about a month long, and I thought, oh, for marketing purposes, we should do a 150-day road trip. Um, Try to do every single province and territory, and we'll write about it, and we'll interview people along the way to find out like what makes Canada special, because there was all these articles starting to come out from different countries,
Uh-huh.
just because of the birthday, trying to find out why Canada is the way it is, and so I thought that'd be cool if we just go ask people,
Mm-hmm.
and and then I thought, well, we're gonna need funding for this somehow, so I came up with a list of maybe 200 or 300 different big companies that I thought could maybe sponsor this. I started with car companies because it made sense for needing a car, and there was a few that expressed interest, but it didn't work out. And then some rental car companies also expressed interest, but it didn't work out. And it's funny, we had got down to, I think it was March or April, and we would have had to start May, and it was a lot of planning.
Uh-huh.
So I almost gave up. I think I gave myself like a week left, and then it turned out I got a phone call from Best Western
Oh.
Hotels, and they were like, we're looking for something to do for Canada's 150, so this looks pretty perfect. So I
Wow.
set up a call with them, and they ended up being our biggest sponsor, and it was enough to get me to start planning the trip. So then I reached out. It was pretty crazy. We only had about 6 weeks to start planning it,
Mm-hmm.
so we continued to plan it as we go, but we ended up deciding to do video.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we had no idea about video, so we hired someone that we had just met on a different project, and he joined us for the whole 150 days and filmed it for us.
Wow.
And it worked out, and it was one of those big things that really kind of was like an ignition for the website,
Mm-hmm.
as you could say.
That's great. So what would like a typical day of travel be like? Like, yeah, I'm sure there's sometimes like just going from point A to point B, but you would then spend some time in rural areas or urban areas or all the above, or what was that like?
Uh, I guess all the above, but it was so it sounded like a lot of time at the beginning, but once we started planning it, it really only came down to like maybe 11 or 12 days
Mm-hmm.
in a province, which the provinces are quite big, so it's not always a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
I know we drove 27,000 kilometers
Wow.
in those 160 days. We spent about 250 hours in the vehicle. So there was some days that were just driving, especially in northern Canada.
Uh-huh.
It was often like 26 hours between a town
Mm-hmm.
and another town. But yeah, a lot of it was we never had a day off. We always thought at the beginning, okay, we'll give ourselves a day off every week kind
Uh,
of thing to get caught up.
right.
But then as you get to a new place, someone says, "Oh, you should go see this. You shouldn't miss this in the video." And then we're like, "Oh, that does sound pretty good." So we ended up not having any day off. So we usually
Wow.
wake up from 8 till 5. Let's say we'd be out experiencing stuff and recording it, and then in the evening, one of us would be either writing about it or editing it to put on social media, and the other one would be reaching out to companies in the next province to see if they'd sponsor us
Wow.
for the videos. It was a lot of, and we're lucky because the guy we hired to film and edit it, thank God he doesn't get car sick because he he was editing as we drove
Oh my
because
gosh.
it was the only time to find time. Like we bought all this stuff to so we could
Oh.
plug it into the vehicle, and he had this black kind of mat around his part of the thing so that he couldn't see outside and just like focus on the video for 12 hours straight.
Wow. So would he upload stuff daily?
So how we
Okay.
ended up doing it was we 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 made one video for each province and territory.
Uh-huh.
So pretty much every 2 to 3 weeks we'd upload
Wow.
a video, and we'd be doing like social media every day, but not
Mm-hmm.
video.
That production just seems grueling, and I mean, bless his heart to be able to do it in a moving car. That's really amazing. Gosh.
And we bought a just before leaving. I bought a drone as well, and
Uh-huh.
I didn't, because I saw it I think I just saw it online. I thought that'd be cool. And then he said, oh, that would really add to our production value.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought this drone, and I'm happy we did, because it really does add some amazing footage. But I didn't realize all the laws around having a drone,
Oh.
and it really added to the headache, especially because we were doing a lot of work in national parks.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's the same in the US. The national parks are really strict
Mm-hmm.
for drones, and it helped that we were doing a project for Canada, I think. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the national parks actually sponsored our film permits,
Oh, wow.
uh, and that kind of stuff. So and I'm lucky because you also have to get drone permission from Transport Canada to to be allowed to have anything in the sky, right?
I'll be
And
darned.
and that was starting to take so long. I ended up phoning them and telling them about the project, and I think they moved my application ahead and approved it. So it all worked
Brilliant.
out in the end, but it was
Oh,
really added to the headache.
gosh, good for you. I mean, you are quite the problem solver. So, so if a listener hears this and they get kind of the Canadian curiosity, if they, let's say, had a week to travel, they didn't, don't necessarily have great chunks of vacation time or something, where would you recommend for them to go?
So if you only had a week, I would definitely focus on one province.
Uh-huh.
Um, it'd be hard to pick one, but for me, definitely our favorites were, we love the East Coast.
Uh-huh.
So Newfoundland was one
Mm-hmm.
of our favorite provinces, and I don't know, I might be a bit biased because my dad's from there, so I do have
Uh-huh.
family there,
Okay, full
spend time there.
disclosure,
But
full disclosure.
yeah, exactly. But even my wife and the filmmaker we hired, we all love Newfoundland. It's just I don't know, it's just it has such a different vibe from the rest of Canada. They have their own music. They really have their own food. Um, they really have their own culture, and
Uh,
because it's an island, if you're there in the springtime, you can see all the icebergs
wow.
off the coast. If you're there in the summer, you see a lot of whales
Oh
and that kind of stuff.
gosh.
So there's just a lot of cool things to do there. Also, Nova Scotia, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to go as far,
Mm-hmm.
was an awesome province. Alberta, my home province, just because of the Rocky Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're they're always amazing to see,
Yeah.
I find, and of course, also BC, if you want to be on the coast, because it's all mountains and coastline. And yeah, uh, there's lots of things to do.
Yeah.
So it'd be hard to pick, but I'd probably focus on either Atlantic Canada, Alberta, or BC if I just had a week.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Good advice. So, and we'll hook up all these things in the show notes and get your videos, and are they on a site? Are they on YouTube? Or if someone can't wait for the show notes, what would be some places for them to check out some of your footage?
So we do have a YouTube channel called Must Do Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So all our videos are there. They're also on the website as well, but yeah, they're definitely on YouTube. And we actually we produce a new video every 2 weeks
Great.
on YouTube. So
Awesome. Good. We'll definitely get links for that in the show notes. So what's next, Matt? I mean, a new 100-item bucket list, or it sounds like parenthood is in the dice. But what new bucket list or what? What's next?
yeah, so there's, I guess, a couple bigger things. I do have another list of 100 things that I'd like to do,
I
but they're
knew it.
all
I knew it.
I, I've made them much more harder this time, like
Oh.
much more difficult. Like I mean, one of them is to become a dad. That's a
Uh-huh.
big thing.
That's a big one.
And
That's jumping out of an air. It's just about as terrifying. So
yeah, exactly. Much longer lasting though.
that's true.
And then yeah, we're launching our first physical product just now,
Oh.
from Must Do Canada. So it's
Uh-huh.
a saver card.
Uh-huh.
So it's basically like a physical card for your wallet that has discounts at various activities, attractions, and adventures
Oh,
all across
wow.
Canada.
Uh-huh.
And so we're just launching that, and I've never launched a physical product before, so it's I just did like the soft launch last week,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, so that's going to be a huge learning
Congratulations. Awesome.
learning curve, I'm sure.
Great. Well, it sounds with your experience, you will master it in no time. So that's fantastic.
Hopefully.
Great. Well, again, we'll get links and do what we can do to support that too. That's fantastic. So just to kind of, wrap up here, I don't want to, go down. I could talk about every single country with you and spend, the rest of the weekend, chatting about this. But so for listeners that want to learn more about you or to follow you or get involved with Live Limitless, what are some of the best ways for them to do so?
Yeah, so I'd say like the two main websites are livelimitless.net or mustdocanada.com.
Okay.
I'm on all the social media channels, usually as Matthew G. Bailey.
Okay.
So on like Instagram, Twitter, and then also under Must Do Canada, like on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook.
Awesome.
I try to be everywhere.
Good. Good. Well,
It's hard now. There's a lot of platforms.
Yeah, and I think, my experience too, we try to do the same with this show that, people sort of have their favorites. Some folks, love Instagram and, are cool to the other platforms. And other folks are, power users of LinkedIn or Facebook or, what have you. So it's kind of nice to be in all the different places so that you can, have support and reach to audiences, to wherever they're at. So bravo with that. And I wish you the best, Matt. Let's keep in touch. So good luck with the next adventures. Good luck with the card. And it's just been a real treat to be able to have you on the show, my friend. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. It was awesome being here. Thanks for having me.
Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website at Life in Full for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and subscribe on your favorite platform. And as for the obligatory disclaimer, this podcast is for general information uses only and does not constitute the practice of psychology, medicine, nutrition, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical or psychological advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I take conflicts of interest seriously. For all of my disclosures as well as show notes, please see livingalifeinfull.org/podcast and my LinkedIn profile. Thanks, and until next time.